What's up? It is your boy Dakquan back here again. And in today's video, we are rocking Flak with the Rakk attack action skill. You can run this thing as Fadeaway if you want to as well. It is great for sniping. You can break out your Skullmashers and your Unseen Threats. It is great for using pistols. It is great for using assault rifles, shotguns, whatever you really want to go towards. There are different ways to mix it around and play around with this build. We have a cool amount of guns from the new DLC, so DLC 2, Guns, Love, and Tentacles. So just play around with it, see what you like the best. Overkill is one of the things that is the guardian rank that is recommended for this setup, so that way you're able to get those consistent one shots with your sniper rifles, and that's pretty much it. So let's hop right into the build. So starting off, we have the Unseen Threat, which is one of the new sniper rifles from the DLC. This thing is insane because once you end up hitting those enemies with those critical hits, you're going to get those 3 different bullets coming out of it, and those are going to be able to hit different targets. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, but when they do end up hitting those different targets and you end up killing the original target, you're going to see multiple enemies just pop immediately. This is really going to be our main gun that we're going to be utilizing inside the setup. One thing I want to mention is that we are running the 100% ASC for our Unseen Threat. That's because when we throw out our Rakks, they're going to take time to actually hit the target, and we're going to be very far away most of the time, or we're going to be maybe mid-range, mid-long range a majority of the time, and that's not going to give the Rakks enough time to actually hit those targets, as well as we're one shot at most things, so they're not going to hit the target because the target is gone majority of the time. So that 100% ASC is going to be fantastic for that. And then the consecutive hits, we're not able to scale that up super well and have that at a very consistent rate. Even with one of our previous grenades that we were using specifically for that situation, we found that the 100% weapon damage ASC worked out better for this particular build. Inside the second slot, we actually have a Brainstorm Er. Now this build is fantastic for repositioning and not feeling over encumbered with a bunch of enemies. This is really for when you just want to run in and just blow up things, especially for the last portion of the bridge. You can just run in and just start shooting and sustain very well. Even with like a consecutive hits one, we did even break out the lifesteal one for this particular clip, and this thing is just able to eat away the enemies at a very good rate. Always a fantastic gun to use, and it's no different inside this setup. Just a really good AoE option that you can play around with. A recursion is also pretty decent, but Brainstorm Er has a bit of a better flow. Recursion is perfect for Rakk because you're going to have your ASCs up 100% of the time, and that's going to allow you to get more and more ricochets when you are utilizing a recursion. So for slots 3 and 4, you have a ton of good options. Want to go ahead and break out the Nemesis. Now this is a fantastic gun for if you just want to blow up something really quick and you don't want to reload. This gun was buffed a while back and it was never really brought to the forefront, but this is a fantastic handgun for this particular build. So for slot number 4, we have the 7 Suns, which is a monster of a pistol. You can think of it as a King's Call or a Queen's Call, except for you don't need to hit critical hits at all. Typically I use this inside spots where those enemies do not have those critical hit spots, or they're not really the most accessible and their enemies are relatively close because the projectiles are a little bit on the slower end. But when you end up hitting those enemies and you have those ASCs up, you're going to be able to get those bonus projectiles, and those things are going to hit very hard. It is more dependent on those additional ASCs coming from your shield and your grenade in terms of elements than some of the other guns inside this build. But when they are up and you are utilizing the inside of a Rakk setup, they can do a lot of work. It is a fantastic gun. It can't spawn with an anoint, but even though that's the situation, it is still one of the better guns inside this game. You can play around with a ton of the different guns. You can play around with the Soul Render, which is fantastic. The Clairvoyance, which is a brand new gun you can play around with. And it also comes in a Masher version. I didn't really care too much for the Masher version in comparison to just a single fire. I know Tor felt the same way when we were playing around with them. Good Juju, also a fantastic gun that was just recently buffed up. You can mess around with the Skullmasher, which is fantastic, and most of the good guns inside this game, you'll be able to run inside the setup. So for our current shield, we're rocking the Rico. There are a couple of really good options that you can play around with in terms of the shield. So Transform is good, as well as the Stopgap. Mess around with whichever one you prefer the most. Now the Rico is really good because of those reflective projectiles. When you take a look at it, when you get the good rolls on this thing, it's going to be able to reflect 80% of the projectiles when your shield is depleted or when your shield is up. So that means that you're not going to be getting hit most of the time at all, and you're going to be further back anyway, so you're not going to be getting hit, and you're going to be able to dodge out of the way of projectiles because you have movement speed. So for our class mods, we ended up with a couple of good options, but we settled on utilizing the Deadeye. There are a couple of reasons why we ended up doing that, but let's hop into the options first. For mobbing, you have the Cosmic Stalker, which is fantastic, or the Deadeye, which is also the main choice that we end up going with. And then for bossing, you want to run something like the Bounty Hunter. It is going to fall behind when it does come to mobbing situations though. So when it comes to the Deadeye versus the Cosmic Stalker on paper, when it is fully ramped up, can out DPS the Deadeye, but you'll find that the Deadeye can perform just as well as the Cosmic Stalker, because the enemies only have so much HP in general, and you're going to be one-shotting them, as well as the fact that you get that added movement speed from the Fast and the Furious on the Deadeye, on top of a chance of getting like some extra projectiles from the Two Fang. So that's going to allow you to ramp up your overkill. It's going to benefit a majority of the guns that we are utilizing inside this main setup, and the majority of the guns that you want to use in this setup in general, while at the same time having that move speed is going to allow us to move out of the way of some of these shots that are coming towards us. We're going to be able to reposition better so that we're able to get better quality shots, and we don't really have to worry about feeling slow because this build is kind of oriented towards zooming around. Now when it comes to Deadeye and the skill distribution, you really have a couple of options. Now the 3 points into the Fast and the Furious is going to give you more consistency than going for the 5 points into the Two Fang, as well as that additional movement speed, which we talked about all the benefits for a little bit earlier. Now having the 5 points into the Two Fang would be cool, but there is something to keep in mind when it does come to Two Fang, is the fact that it is actually predetermined and not random at all. What that means is that the Two Fang procs are going to follow a sequence, and they are going to 100% of the time go ahead and spawn an extra projectile at a certain sequence point, rather than, okay, this shot right here might end up proccing another projectile. For 5 points of the Two Fang, your first shot is going to be an additional projectile, your second shot is not going to be one, and then your third shot is going to be an extra projectile. And then you can see the rest of these zeros, and then you get another extra projectile on shot number 11 with 5 points into Two Fang. So I'll have a link inside of the pinned comment, so that way you guys can dive a little bit deeper into the fixed pools for Flak in general, including Two Fang, and that way you guys can get a better understanding of that. So you have a couple of good grenade options, one of those being the Hunter Seeker for offense. If you are running the Hunter Seeker, it is great because it will end up proccing Furious Attack, it can crit naturally, and it can also proc Megavore. When you do end up critting, you're going to get Leave No Trace procs, which is going to bring you back ammo, and then head count is going to bring you back cooldowns so that we're able to throw out more and more Rakks. And then when it comes over to the Transfusion Tracker, so the Transfusion Tracker is really good as a defensive option because you can actually end up throwing it out while you're shooting and just running around. It can kind of act as a Rakk attack type situation or sustain for your shield. When your shield ends up going down, you can just throw it out into the air, or when your shield is about to go down. And most of the time you'll end up refilling a majority of your shield. And this works out very, very well for keeping you alive if you feel like you need a little bit more defense in certain situations, or you just feel like you just want your shield to come back completely. This is a very good grenade. Been playing around with it for a little bit, and I'm really liking it inside the setup. If you do want a more defense oriented type of grenade. For artifacts, we have a lot of good choices. No Drift Victory Rush, No Drift Auto Idol are both good. They have always been good. This is going to be your movement speed option. Last Stand is going to be more so on the side of super sustain. Didn't feel like we needed the Last Stand at all while playing around. You're not really getting hit much. You have a lot of defensive options already built into it. And then you lose out on a little bit more of the movement speed oriented aspect of this build while you are zooming around. And so that is something to keep in mind. And then for your other damage option, you have the Pearl, which ended up getting nerfed, but it is still an absolute monster. So run this if you want to have a bit more damage and you don't really care too much for the movement speed. So for this build, you can run it as red and green, you can run it as Rakk, you can run it as Fadeaway, you can even run this thing as red and blue if you want to. And it's really up to your preference and what you actually feel like playing. So for our red tree, it's pretty straightforward. Most of these things are actually just going to boost up our damage. And the Planetary Stalker is going to give us more damage. Hunter's Eye is going to give us a great amount of damage as well. Two Fang in this particular situation is great to give us more damage. This gives you one more projectile. So if you're running something like a sniper rifle with one projectile, you're going to be able to get a chance of getting two, which we talked about a little bit earlier. It is predetermined. The more pellets the gun ends up shooting, the less value Two Fang will actually have. So Big Game ends up boosting up hunter skills and hunter kill skills. So that'll be something like the most dangerous game, which coincidentally boosts up our damage. And then Planetary Stalker ends up boosting up our damage, and a couple of other skills inside of the skill tree will get boosted up by Big Game, which is just boosting up damage for the most part. Galactic Shout is a nice little damage increase as well as a little bit of aggro reduction. And then we already talked about most dangerous game being a damage increase. Megavore gonna give us a chance to crit when we don't end up critting naturally. And then when we do end up critting, we can get cooldown from head count. and we also get a chance of getting ammo back from Leave No Trace. Our green tree is pretty straightforward. We're just picking up damage where we can, as well as sustain. Now, Self-Repairing System is a good amount of HP as well as HP regeneration. Furious Attack is a hunter skill, and that's going to give us more gun damage as well as handling. Then All My BFFs is going to keep the pet alive. 1 point to lick the wound, so that way the pet can keep us alive. If we end up going down, it can pick us back up. Turn, Tail, and Run is going to give us HP regeneration as well as damage reduction when we are moving, and then when we stand still, we're able to get a nice bonus in gun damage as well as fire rate increase, which can work out pretty well for sniping when we do end up using the gun damage while we're standing still for a little bit. The Fast and the Furious is really good because it gives us more gun damage as well as movement speed, allows us to glide through. Pet damage really isn't anything too important. 5 points Rage and Recover, that's going to allow us to get some more HP regeneration and keep us alive. For the Capstone, we have the Power Inside. Now this is going to give you a 25% damage increase when you end up activating your action skill. That will be 50% if you do end up activating it at full HP. And that's one of the reasons why having HP regeneration inside of your kit is important. The more HP regeneration that you have, the less often that you are not at full HP, and that's going to allow you to really capitalize on this Capstone. Some of the options that you can play around with inside this tree are moving the points out of Self-Repair System, which once again does give you HP regeneration, so might not be the best move in the world. But moving points out of Self-Repair System and going into Overclocked, which will give you more fire rate. That's a bit more for the offensive side of things. It really will cater more to like assault rifles and higher fire rate type guns. But once again, you're cutting into your HP regeneration, which will potentially end up making you lose damage from the Power Inside, so it may not be the best choice in the world. There's also an opportunity to move some points around and put them into Eager to Impress, which will give you back cooldown a little bit faster. That can work out relatively well for situations where you're just sniping and one-shotting enemies and you don't really get your head count to proc too much. For our augments, we have the Falconer's Feast, which is going to give us back a nice amount of HP, 7% per rack that ends up hitting, and then we end up doubling our racks with Flak and Lows, so that way we are able to heal even more HP off of this. And then to finish it all off, we have the pet, the Spiraling Scorcher, that's going to give us HP regeneration as well as an elemental damage increase. Now that is it for the tree, and that is it for the build. We don't have anything inside of blue for this particular setup. If you guys have any questions about anything, go ahead and let me know inside the comments below. And yeah, let me know how the build feels and how it goes. Adios.